Before this video starts, I just want to say thank you to everybody who subscribed to the channel because we just hit 7,000 subscribers. You can probably hear the smile on my face in my voice as I said that, because that is just a ridiculous number that I never thought I would be reaching ever, let alone before a year has passed since PSVR 2 has come out. And I have you guys to thank for that. Thank you so much for sticking around, for watching the content, for supporting, for commenting, for liking the videos, for disliking the videos if you didn't like them, for giving me feedback. All of that stuff has been so appreciated, and all I can say is thank you. If we can hit 10,000 subs by the end of the year, I will be absolutely ecstatic, so every little helps for that. If you do feel like subscribing, go for it. Anyway, with that out of the way, enjoy the video. I want to talk about something simultaneously fun and also kind of depressing today, because there are a lot of games that I would love from the PSVR era to come over to PSVR 2 as ports. And don't get me wrong, we've had loads of good ports, such as Beat Saber, Job Simulator. A lot of the classics have come over, but there are 10 games that I've put together that I believe would be amazing on PSVR 2 with the Sense controllers, a proper upgrade, or even, possibly, a sequel. So, there will be some in this list that you definitely know already, and some that you'll be craving after you listen to it, and some that you may not have thought about at all. So, let's get straight into it. Let's start off with a bang. Resident Evil, and not any Resident Evil, Resi 7. Possibly the most terrifying Resident Evil game that there is. I could barely get through the first couple of minutes of it on PSVR 1. I was very scared back then, and I still would be now. This needs a PSVR 2 port with Sense controller support, with all the amazing visuals that we get for Village and for the 4 remake, because I believe Resi 7 would look incredible, and Capcom is no stranger to doing VR ports. They've done it for all the PSVR 2 Resi games, and they've done it for Resi 7 on PSVR 1, and I definitely believe this one could happen. I'm not in the loop on everything that Capcom is doing in terms of Resident Evil, but I really hope that Resi 7 PSVR 2 port is on the cards, because it has some of the best locales in the series in terms of horror, some of the scariest enemies, and some of the best sound design too. If you've never played the demo that was free on PSVR for Resi 7, or played the full game in its entirety on PSVR, you are missing out, because it genuinely is one of the best VR horror experiences I've ever had, even though I only played a little bit of it for my own sanity. So there we have Resi 7 kicking us off. I would love to see it on PSVR 2. Next up, we have one that I kind of want just for the gimmick that it's based on, and that is SUPERHOT VR. SUPERHOT was so damn fun on the original PSVR. Unfortunately, the team has moved on from it. They're actually onto new projects like Toy Trains VR, which looks very, very fun. It's not my style that I usually review on the channel, but I would love to take a look at it at some point, especially since they're still updating it as it's come out. But that team originally worked on SUPERHOT, the game where your movements stop time if you stop. If you don't move, then the world around you stays as it is, and you can plan your next moves carefully. That meant that SUPERHOT VR ended up being an incredible VR shooter, because it had this great gimmick of time slowing down when you move, and while I love SUPERHOT on the flat screen, VR elevated it so much to the point where it's a port that I would absolutely adore to have on PSVR 2 with the Sense controller tracking that would make pulling off incredible Neo-like moves even more effortless. So SUPERHOT VR definitely needs a port, because I miss this game on PSVR 2, I really do. Unfortunately, the feasibility of this one, it doesn't seem too likely, because the team, as I said, have moved on to newer and better things for them. Moving on from that game, we have my next, which is Blood and Truth, a game that, don't lynch me for this, I never actually played. I played kind of the precursor to it, the London Heist on PlayStation VR Worlds, but we'll get into that in a little bit. But Blood and Truth is basically that concept expanded into a full game with bombastic set pieces, and as I understand it, I think it was kind of on rails, but the set pieces were amazing, the gunplay was fun, and the story was pretty engaging, so I'd love to see this one on PSVR 2. Not sure if it's that feasible that we get an upgrade though. It seems that Sony has kind of left this one behind, which is really unfortunate. But I would love to see Blood and Truth come over, because it's a game that I personally didn't get to experience, and I've only heard high praise from it. If you guys were there in the PSVR 1 generation like I was, and you actually played Blood and Truth, please do let me know what it was like in the comments below, because all I've seen is praise about it online, especially on Reddit and all those other forums. And I do feel like I missed out, and I really want to experience this game, so I'd love to see it come over to PSVR 2. I said we'd touch on PlayStation VR Worlds, and I'm not going to disappoint. Let's talk about it, because this one is probably a game that I have the most thoughts on this list, to an extent, because PlayStation VR Worlds was more of an experience that takes you through multiple different small games. The London Heist was one of them, a short heist series where you break in, steal a diamond, get out, and then have to deal with the repercussions. There was also the Odyssey story, which was really, really cool, where you're a pilgrim, you were in a sci-fi setting in a mech suit having to fight bugs and aliens, and that truly was a spectacle. It would look so good on the PSVR 2, especially with the OLED panels and the 4K displays. But by far one of the ones that I missed the most was simply the shark cage experience. This was split up into two experiences. One was the shark encounter, and the other was just you sitting in the ocean watching wildlife happen around you. Not only is it a game that I dearly miss because I loved revisiting that experience for a bit of adrenaline in VR, but it was also a great introduction for newcomers. And while we do have the amazing Horizon boat ride to show off to new people that I actually have demoed to quite a lot of my friends and family, I do miss having that visceral shark encounter because it strikes fear in them and gets an emotive response out of them. If somebody doesn't know Horizon, they're not going to see Horizon called on a mountain and that boat ride and think, wow, I'm in a world that I recognize. But the shark encounter on PlayStation VR Worlds definitely was that. It was something real that you could latch onto, and it felt visceral and it felt very engaging, and I missed that, and I really want PlayStation VR Worlds, at least in some capacity, to come over to PSVR 2, although again, I don't have high hopes that that will ever happen, unfortunately. Next up, another PSVR 1 classic, Farpoint, the sci-fi shooter that introduced the aim controller and the bundle that I brought the aim controller in as well. The aim controller was probably a weird looking piece of tech. I don't have one to hand right now, otherwise I'd cut to me and show you. It's back at home, I'm at uni unfortunately. But the aim controller was pretty great and Farpoint was an amazing game. It was kind of ahead of its time in terms of the shooting mechanics it had. It had boss fights, it had smaller enemy types, it had a lot of enemy variety, it had a really cool setting and backdrop with loads of great artwork for skyboxes, and the actual game itself just looked phenomenal for the PSVR 1 headset. I'm so surprised they managed to pull that off on the PS4. That is slightly ridiculous, but Farpoint was amazing, and there were rumors of a sequel when that PSVR 2 advert came out, showing this weird space game that we'd never seen before that's on screen now. Fortunately, that never materialized, and I'm assuming if they had something to announce about it, it would have been announced by now. So either a sequel to Farpoint or a remaster would be just incredible to revisit it again on the high-spec OLED panels of the PSVR 2, with better tracking, and maybe co-op in the campaign would be a lot of fun. But yeah, I miss playing through Farpoint, I absolutely loved it on PSVR 1. And I wish we had it on PSVR 2. Here's another no-brainer as well, Skyrim. One that will probably never happen, although Microsoft is talking about letting go of some of their IPs a little bit more than they had in the past, so maybe we could see it happen. But the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim VR was just an immaculate experience. Sure, the controls were pretty janky, but once you got used to them, it was so immersive traversing through Skyrim. I have very vivid memories of going through the world, going through caves with a torch in one hand and a sword in the other. And while its mechanics would feel slightly dated now because there's no interaction with objects really, just being in that world is something really special, and PSVR 2 as a headset is missing that in terms of an RPG on that scale with voice acting and NPCs. Legendary Tales is kind of an amazing split off from that, but it isn't the full VR RPG that some people want it to be, and Skyrim VR would be as a port. Maybe Bethesda can get their hands back on the wheel in terms of PSVR 2 and bring us Fallout and Skyrim in VR. Next up, Hitman, because who doesn't want to play out their stealth fantasies in VR? A game that was very janky on PSVR 1, and honestly I thought didn't live up to its full potential. Looks like a lot of fun on PC with motion controls, albeit still a bit of a janky mess. But I really think that that janky mess would be a lot of fun on the PSVR 2 and would open up not just loads of fun ideas for content for people like me, but just very fun scenarios for players to play through at home. And it's a game that I personally feel like missed the mark on PSVR, but could be given new life on PSVR 2. A very big franchise, could bring a lot of people in. Who knows, Hitman VR would be a very smart decision, I think, to bring it over to the PSVR 2 headset. Next up, while I love Switchback VR, I would also like its companion piece, Until Dawn Rush of Blood, to come over, because although Switchback has more variety in its levels and after the visual patch is just incredible looking, and makes use of the PSVR 2 features in ways that I never thought possible, I would also just love to revisit Rush of Blood on a headset that has tracking that supports it properly, the haptics that could enhance the roller coaster feeling just like it does with Switchback, and it would give new players access to an old PSVR 1 classic that we sing high praises about, and that's for a very good reason. A genuinely scary roller coaster shooter that would pair very nicely with Switchback VR on PSVR2. Who knows, maybe one day. Penultimately, we have Iron Man VR, a game that I also only got to experience briefly on PSVR 1. It is on Quest, but it isn't anywhere to be seen on PSVR 2, and although it does have its limitations in terms of movement, the graphical quality not being the highest due to it being a PSVR game, that's the case with a lot of these games on the list, but not all of them. I do feel like the experience of being Iron Man would be awesome with the haptics on PSVR 2. The almost perfect tracking would also make it so much easier to tilt and weave in the air, and it's a power fantasy that we don't really have on PSVR 2. There's no flying games in terms of first person stuff like that, and I feel like superhero games are an untapped market on PSVR 2 and VR in general, so Iron Man VR would be very welcomed on Sony's flagship gaming headset. And finally, because I know a lot of people are going to be mad at me if I don't include this, Astrobot. From what I hear, Astrobot Rescue Mission was a very endearing, very well crafted, very well thought out, and overall just incredible experience of a puzzler and third-person action game on PSVR 1. All I hear is praise from this, and honestly I've looked back at some old footage and I can see why. It had some of the best fluid simulation I've seen in VR, which is really weird for a game from that time. I did play through Astro's Playroom VR and loved all of that, so I can only imagine how great Astrobot Rescue Mission was as a whole. I think it's Team Asobi behind these games, and they are so talented at what they do in terms of VR and Astrobot in general. If you've played the PS5 Astrobot game when you first got your console, you'll know how good the implementation of haptics are there. The only other game that comes close to it in terms of haptic level is Helldivers 2, and that just came out. So imagine how good the haptics would be on a VR Astrobot game that comes out now, whether it be a remake or remaster of the old Rescue Mission or a sequel. It needs to come to PSVR 2 because this is a hidden gem that not enough people have played, including me. And I've been told enough times to get my shit together and play this game, so I really hope it comes over to PSVR 2. Anyway, that video turned out to be a lot more passionate than I thought it would be. I thought this would be a very chill list, but getting to the end of it, my voice kind of hurts because I was really getting into it there. There are so many games on this list I'd love to see come over to PSVR 2. I'm sure you have some other suggestions, so please leave them in the comments below. What do you want to see? Have I missed anything very, very obvious? These are just my picks after all, so please do let me know. If you did enjoy, feel free to like and subscribe, and I hope to see you all in the next video.